The crystalline spires of the Etherian palace pierced the violet sky, their surfaces refracting the light of 3 moons into dancing patterns across the capital city below. Queen Nidra stood at her observation deck, her iridescent skin catching the starlight as she contemplated the latest reports from her science division. The Etherians had long prided themselves on their purely logical approach to existence, having evolved beyond what they considered the primitive constraints of emotion. Yet something troubled the Queen. Despite their technological superiority and mathematical perfection in all things, their civilization had reached a plateau. No amount of logical optimization seemed to push them forward anymore. The reports before her showed declining rates of innovation, stagnating cultural development, and a subtle but undeniable sense of emptiness. The soft chime of her chamber doors interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she commanded, her voice carrying the melodic tones characteristic of her species. Her chief advisor, Kyra, glided into the room with typical Etherian precision. "My queen, the human diplomatic vessel has entered our orbit," Kyra announced, her silver eyes betraying no hint of the disapproval Nidra knew she harbored. "Their representative awaits your audience." Humans. The very word sent a ripple of curiosity through Nidra's normally controlled mind. Their species was an anomaly in the galaxy, technologically inferior yet remarkably resilient, emotionally volatile yet consistently innovative. They defied logical explanation, and that made them fascinating. "Very well," Nidra responded, adjusting her ceremonial crown of living crystal. "Let us see what these creatures have to offer." The throne room was a marvel of geometric perfection, each angle and surface calculated to create an atmosphere of absolute authority. Nidra took her place on the crystalline throne, surrounded by her advisory council, as the human delegation was announced. Marcus Reed entered the chamber with a confidence that immediately set him apart from other alien diplomats. While others typically showed signs of intimidation when faced with Etherian grandeur, he seemed genuinely appreciative, his green eyes taking in the architecture with unconcealed wonder. "Queen Nidra of the Etherian Empire," he bowed with surprising grace, "I bring greetings from Earth. Thank you for agreeing to these diplomatic talks." Nidra studied him with growing interest. His emotional responses were clearly visible on his face, something Etherians would consider a weakness, yet there was a strength in his bearing that suggested otherwise. "Welcome, Marcus Reed. Your reputation precedes you." "All good things, I hope," he replied with a smile, an expression that caused several council members to shift uncomfortably. The formal introductions proceeded according to protocol, but Nidra found herself increasingly distracted by the human's mannerisms. Every gesture, every fluctuation in his voice, carried meaning beyond the words themselves. It was inefficient, illogical, and utterly captivating. During the preliminary negotiations, Marcus presented a proposal for cultural exchange alongside the standard trade agreements. "Your civilization has achieved incredible things through the power of pure logic," he acknowledged, "but perhaps there's value in understanding different approaches to progress. You suggest we could learn from a species that still operates on emotional impulses?" Kyra interjected, her tone carrying the barest hint of disdain. "I suggest," Marcus responded evenly, "that both our species could benefit from understanding each other. After all, isn't the pursuit of knowledge logical?" Nidra raised her hand, silencing any further objections from her council. "An interesting proposition, Marcus Reed. Tell me, what could emotions possibly offer that logic cannot? Innovation born from intuition. Art that moves the soul. Connections that transcend rational explanation." His eyes met hers directly, a breach of protocol that should have offended her but somehow didn't. "And experiences your people have dismissed as myth, like the phenomenon we call climax." The word sent a subtle ripple through the council chamber. It was a concept the Etherians had long ago categorized as primitive fiction, yet the way Marcus spoke of it suggested otherwise. "You claim this phenomenon is real?" Nidra found herself asking, aware of her council's growing discomfort. As real as the stars above us, Marcus replied. It's just one example of how emotion and physical sensation can combine to create experiences that pure logic can never explain. The audience concluded shortly after, but Nidra's thoughts remained fixed on the human's words. That night, in the solitude of her private chambers, she accessed the restricted archives on human physiology and culture. The more she read, the more questions arose in her mind. Could there truly be power in these primitive emotions? Had her civilization's pursuit of pure logic cost them something essential? And why did the presence of this human diplomat make her wonder about experiences she had always dismissed as beneath her? As the capital's 3 moons reached their apex, Queen Nidra made a decision that would alter the course of her empire forever. She would investigate these claims personally, no matter the protocol violations it might entail. After all, wasn't the pursuit of truth the highest form of logic? Little did she know, this decision would not only challenge everything she believed about her species' superiority but would also lead to discoveries that would shake the very foundations of Etherian society. In the days following the initial diplomatic meeting, Queen Nidra found herself drawn to the human archives with increasing frequency. Her private terminal glowed with information about Earth's history, culture, and most intriguingly, their concept of personal relationships. The more she learned, the more she questioned the foundations of Etherian society. Your Majesty, Kyra's voice interrupted her studies one evening, the Council expresses concern about your recent interests. The chief advisor's perfect posture couldn't hide her unease. Does the Council now presume to dictate their queen's pursuit of knowledge? Nidra's voice carried a sharp edge, an unusual display that surprised them both. Of course not, my queen. However, your repeated private meetings with the human diplomat have not gone unnoticed. Indeed, Nidra had been meeting with Marcus Reed in the palace's crystalline gardens, away from the formal setting of the throne room. Each conversation revealed new facets of human experience that both puzzled and fascinated her. Tell me, Marcus, she asked during one such meeting, watching as he admired the geometric perfection of Etherian flora, how do humans navigate the chaos of emotional attachment? Marcus smiled, touching one of the crystal flowers gently. We don't navigate it, really. We embrace it. The uncertainty, the risk, it's all part of what makes the connection meaningful. But how can something be meaningful without logical purpose? Nidra pressed, aware that she was breaking numerous protocols by engaging in such personal discourse. Some of the most meaningful things in life defy logic, Marcus replied, turning to face her. Take beauty, for instance. Your gardens are mathematically perfect, yet on Earth, we find beauty in imperfection, in wildflowers growing in unexpected places, in asymmetrical patterns, in the chaos of nature itself. Nidra found herself moving closer, drawn by the passion in his voice. You speak of these things as if they hold power. They do. Emotion, connection, intimacy, they're forms of power your people have forgotten. His green eyes met hers with an intensity that sent an unfamiliar sensation through her being. You feel it now, don't you? That pull? That's not logic, Your Majesty. That's something else entirely. The Queen's internal struggle was interrupted by approaching footsteps. They turned to see Kyra standing at the garden's entrance, her silver eyes narrowed with disapproval. My Queen, the Council requires your presence. In the Council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. Elder Theron, his aged face a map of disapproval, stood to address her. Your Majesty, your behavior has become concerning. This fascination with human customs threatens to undermine the very principles of our society. Does it? Nidra challenged, feeling an unfamiliar heat in her words. Or does it challenge your comfortable assumptions about our superiority? We have evolved beyond the need for primitive emotional responses, another council member, Venna, interjected. To entertain these human notions is to invite regression. Is it regression to question? To explore? To seek understanding? Nidra's voice carried a new quality, passion, though she wouldn't have named it such. Are we truly as evolved as we claim if we fear mere knowledge? The council chambers erupted in murmurs of dissent. Kyra stepped forward, her voice low and urgent. My queen, please. Consider your position, your duty to our people. But Nidra was already considering something else, the way her pulse quickened when Marcus spoke of human experiences, the strange warmth that filled her chest when he looked at her, the growing sense that her people's pursuit of pure logic had left them hollow. Later that night, she summoned Marcus to her private study, an unprecedented breach of protocol that sent ripples of scandal through the palace. He arrived looking concerned, clearly aware of the political tension he had inadvertently sparked. Your council seems unhappy with our discussions, he observed, standing closer than Etherian etiquette would allow. They fear what they don't understand, Nidra replied, surprising herself with the bitterness in her tone. We pride ourselves on knowledge, yet we refuse to learn anything that challenges our preconceptions. Understanding emotions requires experiencing them, Marcus said softly. You can't study connection from a safe distance. At some point, you have to take the risk. Nidra turned to face him, aware of the gravity of this moment. Then teach me, Marcus Reed. Show me what my people have forgotten. Are you sure? His voice was gentle but serious. This path may change everything. Perhaps, she replied, feeling the first stirrings of what humans called excitement, everything needs to change. As the palace's crystal spires caught the light of the setting suns, casting rainbow patterns across her study, Queen Nidra made her second momentous decision in as many weeks. She would not merely study human emotions, she would experience them, consequences be damned. Unknown to her, Kyra watched from the shadows, her loyalty to the crown warring with her duty to protect Etherian traditions. The chief advisor's hand tightened on a communication device, knowing that her next decision would alter the course of not just one life, but an entire civilization. Deep within the restricted archives of the Etherian palace, Queen Nidra accessed files that hadn't been viewed in centuries. The soft glow of ancient data streams illuminated her face as she absorbed information about her species' distant past, before they had embraced pure logic. What she found both thrilled and disturbed her. We weren't always like this, she whispered to herself, studying records of Etherian art, music, and something that appeared remarkably similar to what humans called romance. Her people had once experienced emotions freely, until a period of violent conflict led them to systematically suppress their emotional capacity. The door to the archives slid open, revealing Marcus. His presence in this forbidden space was enough to warrant severe punishment, but Nidra had long since stopped caring about such protocols. I found something, she said without preamble, her voice trembling with an emotion she was beginning to recognize as excitement. My people, we once felt as your people do. We chose to change ourselves, to embrace pure logic as a means of survival. Marcus moved closer, studying the ancient records. And now you're choosing to remember, he observed softly. That's incredibly brave. Or incredibly foolish, she replied, but there was no conviction in her words. The council believes you're corrupting me with human ideas, but these feelings, they were ours first. We buried them so deeply we forgot they existed. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert. Security systems throughout the palace had detected unauthorized access to restricted areas. Kyra's voice echoed through the communication system, My queen, your presence is required immediately in the council chamber. Nidra and Marcus exchanged glances. They know, she said simply. The council chamber was filled with tension when they arrived. Elder Theron stood at the center, his usually composed features tight with disapproval. Your Majesty, you have accessed forbidden archives and shared classified information with an outsider. These actions cannot be overlooked. Cannot be overlooked? Nidra's voice carried a new strength. Or cannot be allowed to challenge your control? Tell them, Theron. Tell them what I found in those archives. The elder's face paled slightly. My queen, those records were sealed for the good of our people. They were sealed to maintain a lie, Nidra countered, feeling a surge of what she now recognized as anger. We didn't evolve beyond emotions, we feared them. We chose to suppress them, to deny our own nature. Marcus stood quietly beside her, his presence both a comfort and a catalyst. The council members shifted uncomfortably as Nidra continued. I've experienced what we lost, she declared. The human ambassador has shown me that emotions aren't weakness, they're a source of strength we abandoned out of fear. This is precisely why such knowledge was restricted, Kyra interjected. These dangerous ideas threaten the stability of our society. Our society is already unstable, Nidra responded. We've stagnated, trapped in patterns of pure logic that leave no room for growth or genuine discovery. When was the last time we created something truly new? When did we last feel wonder at the universe around us? The chamber erupted in chaos, or as close to chaos as Etherians could manage. Voices raised in logical argument, citing statistics and historical precedents. But Nidra noticed something interesting. Beneath their logical facades, emotions were already seeping through. Fear, anger, curiosity, feelings their species had supposedly evolved beyond were visible in their faces and gestures. In the midst of the debate, Marcus touched her arm gently. The simple contact sent waves of sensation through her body, confirming everything she had learned about the power of physical connection. She turned to face him, aware that every eye in the chamber was on them. Your people are watching, he murmured. They're seeing their queen experience something they've denied themselves for generations. Nidra straightened, her iridescent skin glowing with intensity. Let them see, she replied. Let them remember what we once were, what we could be again. But even as she spoke, she noticed Kyra slipping quietly from the chamber. Her chief advisor's departure sent a chill through her, not of logic, but of instinct. Something was wrong. The warning came from an unexpected source. Elder Theron, his ancient eyes filled with unexpected emotion, approached her quietly. My queen, he whispered, there are those among us who would rather see the monarchy fall than allow these changes. Be careful. As if to confirm his warning, the palace's security systems suddenly activated, sealing all exits. Kyra's voice echoed through the chamber once again, but this time it carried no pretense of respect. For the preservation of our way of life, she announced, the queen must be contained. Her human contamination cannot be allowed to spread. Nidra felt Marcus move closer, protectively. Around them, council members were taking sides, some moving to support Kyra's coup, others standing firmly with their queen. The air crackled with tensions that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the emotions they had so long denied. In that moment, facing the betrayal of her most trusted advisor, Queen Nidra finally understood what humans meant by feeling alive. Her heart raced, her senses heightened, every cell in her body alert and ready. She was afraid, yes, but she was also exhilarated, determined, and oddly free. She reached for Marcus's hand, no longer caring who saw. It seems, she said with a smile that would have shocked her former self, that we're about to test just how powerful emotions can be. The palace security systems pulsed with crimson energy as alarms blared through the crystalline corridors. Queen Nidra and Marcus found themselves cornered in the council chamber, surrounded by those who had chosen to side with Kyra. The air crackled with tensions that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with the awakening emotions of a species remembering its true nature. Your Majesty, Kyra's voice echoed through the chamber's communication system, surrender now, and we can help you recover from this emotional contamination. The human will be removed, and order will be restored. Nidra felt Marcus's hand tighten around hers. The sensation sent waves of warmth through her body, strengthening her resolve. And if I refuse, she challenged. Then you will be removed from power, Kyra replied coldly. For the good of our people. Elder Theron stepped forward, his ancient face lined with concern. My queen, there may be another way. The ancient archives speak of a ritual, a way to prove the worth of emotional connection to our people. The resonance chamber, Nidra breathed, remembering the forbidden texts she had discovered. Where our ancestors once shared their deepest truths. It still exists, Theron confirmed, deep beneath the palace. If you can reach it, if you can demonstrate the power of this connection you speak of, even the most logical minds would have to acknowledge its value. Marcus turned to Nidra, his green eyes intense. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. The queen surveyed the chamber. Some council members had already fled, others stood uncertain, while a loyal few gathered around her. She made her decision. The chamber, she declared. But we'll need to get past Kyra's forces. As if in response, the doors burst open. Security drones flooded in, their crystalline forms pulsing with deadly energy. But something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, several drones suddenly changed color, turning from hostile red to a peaceful blue. I may have made some adjustments to the palace security protocols, Marcus grinned. Being a diplomat doesn't mean I can't also hack alien technology. Nidra felt an unfamiliar sensation bubble up from within her, laughter. The sound startled everyone in the chamber, its pure joy cutting through the tension like a beam of light through crystal. They moved quickly through the palace corridors, their small group protected by the reprogrammed drones. Elder Theron led them to a hidden entrance, a spiral staircase that descended deep beneath the palace foundations. The chamber hasn't been used in centuries, he warned as they descended. Its power source may be unstable. The deeper they went, the more ancient the architecture became. The perfect geometric patterns of modern Etherean design gave way to more organic forms, revealing their civilization's emotional past. Finally, they reached a vast circular chamber. Its walls were lined with crystals that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, responding to the presence of living beings. At the center stood two pillars of pure crystal, their surfaces etched with symbols from their species' past. The resonance pillars, Theron explained. They were designed to amplify and share emotional experiences between individuals. In ancient times, they were used to forge deep connections and resolve conflicts through shared understanding. Nidra approached the pillars, feeling their energy call to her. How does it work? The two participants must stand between the pillars. Their emotional state, their connection, their very essence will be amplified and shared with all present. But be warned, the process can be overwhelming. Few in our time have experienced such raw emotion. Above them, they could hear the sounds of Kyra's forces approaching. They had minutes at most. Marcus, Nidra turned to him, her iridescent skin glowing with intensity, will you share this with me? Will you help me show my people what they've forgotten? His response was to step forward, taking his place beside her between the pillars. Always. As Kyra and her forces burst into the chamber, the pillars began to glow. The crystal surfaces pulsed with increasing brightness as the connection between Nidra and Marcus deepened. Their shared emotions, trust, fear, hope, and something deeper that neither had dared name, resonated through the ancient technology. The chamber filled with light and sensation. Every Etherean present felt the wave of emotions wash over them, breaking through centuries of suppression. They experienced not just Nidra and Marcus's connection, but echoes of their own buried feelings. Kyra staggered, overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience. This is impossible, she gasped. But it wasn't impossible. It was real as the racing of Nidra's heart, as real as the warmth of Marcus's touch, as real as the tears that now flowed freely down Kyra's face, the first she had shed in her entire life. The light from the pillars reached a crescendo, and in that moment of perfect connection, Queen Nidra finally understood what Marcus had tried to tell her about the human experience of climax. It wasn't just physical sensation or emotional response, it was transcendence, a moment of perfect unity between body, mind, and soul. As the light began to fade, Nidra opened her eyes to find her people transformed. The rigid masks of logic had cracked, revealing the authentic faces beneath. Some were weeping, others laughing, all experiencing the full spectrum of emotion their species had denied for so long. But their victory came with a price. The ancient chamber, its power source destabilized by the intensity of the connection, began to shake. Crystal shards fell from the ceiling as the very foundations of the palace trembled. "We need to get out of here," Marcus urged, supporting Nidra as she swayed, drained from the experience. As they rushed to evacuate, Nidra realized that the chamber's collapse was oddly fitting. The old foundations of their society were crumbling, making way for something new, something that combined the best of logic and emotion. The question was, would they survive long enough to build it? The evacuation from the collapsing resonance chamber became a desperate race against time. Crystal shards rained down as ancient support structures groaned under centuries of pressure. Queen Nidra led her people upward, her hand firmly clasped in Marcus's, while behind them, the foundations of their old world crumbled away. They emerged into a palace transformed. Not physically, the crystalline spires still reached toward the triple moons, but the people within had changed fundamentally. Everywhere, Etherians were experiencing emotions openly for the first time in generations. Some wept, others laughed, many simply held each other, overwhelmed by the intensity of their awakened feelings. Kyra stood in the grand hall, tears streaming down her face, her perfect composure shattered. When she saw Nidra approach, she fell to her knees. "My queen. I never knew. We never knew. How could we have forgotten this?" Nidra helped her former advisor rise, feeling compassion replace anger. "We forgot because we chose to forget, Kyra. Fear drove us to deny our own nature. But no more." The following days brought chaos, or what the Etherians had once considered chaos. In reality, it was the messy, beautiful process of a civilization remembering how to feel. The council chambers, once a place of cold logic, became filled with heated debates, passionate speeches, and even occasional laughter. Marcus worked tirelessly alongside Nidra, helping her people navigate their emotional awakening. His presence had become essential not just to her, but to the entire transformation of Etherian society. One evening, as the triple moons cast their light across the palace gardens, Nidra found him standing by the luminescent flowers. Their petals had begun growing in unpredictable patterns, responding to the emotional energy now flowing freely through the palace. "The flowers are changing," she observed, moving to stand beside him. "Like us. Nature always finds a way to express itself," Marcus replied, turning to face her. "Just as your people are finding their way back to their true nature." Nidra reached out, touching one of the crystalline petals. "The council has been reviewing the ancient archives. We're discovering so much about who we once were, who we could be again. But we're not simply returning to the past, we're creating something new. A balance," Marcus suggested, "between logic and emotion. Between order and chaos. Between thought and feeling." "Yes." Nidra turned to him, her iridescent skin glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with emotion. "We're learning that true wisdom lies not in denying either aspect of ourselves, but in embracing both." The changes spread beyond the palace walls. Throughout the capital city, art began appearing in unexpected places. Music, something long relegated to mathematical exercises, filled the streets. Couples walked hand in hand, children laughed openly, and the rigid patterns of Etherian society began shifting into something more organic, more alive. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some Etherians, overwhelmed by the intensity of their awakened emotions, retreated into isolated enclaves where they could maintain their purely logical existence. Nidra ensured they were free to make this choice, understanding that true freedom meant accepting different paths. In the rebuilt council chamber, now designed with flowing lines that combined mathematical precision with artistic beauty, Nidra addressed her transformed government. "We stand at a crossroads," she declared. "Our past was built on the suppression of emotion. Our future must be built on the integration of all aspects of our nature. Logic and emotion, thought and feeling, order and chaos, these are not opposites to be fought over, but complementary forces to be balanced." She glanced at Marcus, who stood proudly by her side, then continued. "The humans have shown us what we forgot. Not just the power of emotion, but the strength that comes from embracing our whole selves. In return, we can show them the beauty of combining that passion with the clarity of logical thought." The transformation of Etherian society became known across the galaxy as the Great Awakening. Other species watched in amazement as these once coldly logical beings began producing art that moved the soul while advancing science that stretched the boundaries of possibility. Their architecture evolved, their music soared, and their relationships deepened. But perhaps the most profound change was visible in the quiet moments. In the way Queen Nidra and Marcus shared soft words in the garden. In the sound of laughter echoing through crystalline halls that had known only silence. In the tears of joy at new births, the complex emotions of loss, the deep connections between individuals who had forgotten how to connect. Years later, visitors to the Etherian capital would find a new chamber built where the ancient resonance chamber had collapsed. This one was designed not to awaken suppressed emotions, but to celebrate the full spectrum of Etherian nature. At its heart stood a crystal sculpture, two figures, one Etherian and one human, their forms intertwined in an eternal dance of logic and emotion, thought and feeling, order and chaos. And if one looked closely, they might see Queen Nidra and Marcus walking in the gardens below, their hands clasped together, their love a testament to the power of connection that transcends all boundaries, even those we create within ourselves.